Hey there, and welcome back to Baldur's Gate 3. My name is Pete, and today we complete another episode of this Honor Mode walkthrough with our Dark Urge Halfling Bard, Sylvia Hairyfoot. Last time we left off, after exploring the Arcane Tower, we encountered and eventually fought its automaton guardian Bernard, and we grabbed 2 mushrooms for the Mind Flayer Omalium, who you can see in the back here. Unfortunately though, instead of solving our tadpole problem, the brew that Omalium concocted only made our problem worse. So our overall goal of reaching Moonrise Towers in search of a solution has not changed. For today though, we have our sights set on the Duergar encampment, not to mention that we're also still searching for the Adamantine Forge. Now, in order to get to the Duergar village, we want to fast travel back to the beach. However, let us briefly revisit the Arcane Tower for a few seconds here, as there is one more thing we can do that I forgot last episode. After activating the tower's arcane power generator, the turrets here have been shot down. However, we can still attack and destroy them for valuable experience points. Admittedly, their sturdy feature, the fact that they only lose hit points if an attack deals over 10 points of damage, makes this a rather tedious affair. They are vulnerable to lightning damage, but unfortunately none of our party members currently has access to it. Eventually though, Shadowheart's Sacred Flame also gets the job done. And so we earn 40 experience points and can now repeat this 3 more times for a grand total of 160 XP, certainly nothing to scoff at, even at level 5. Actually, we have almost reached level 6 already, and we should be able to reach that level in just a few minutes. For now though, we fast travel back to the beach, where the corpse of a dead Duergar can now be spoken to.
The corpse regards you lifelessly.
We've got 6 questions to choose from, and we can ask only 5, and as always, we'll begin with introductions and learn who we're talking to.
Hunter, Raver, Warrior of the Absolute.
This then also already answers question number 5, the one about profession, so we can move on by asking what happened to him.
Myconids made me hurt myself.
So, the Myconid spores, clearly nothing to toy with. Of course, though, there must have been a reason why they were emitted.
Hunting. Runaway slave.
And that slave we already met and healed back in the Myconid colony, so let's shift the conversation onto valuables.
Me? No, gnomes. We're fiddling with rubble. Yonder.
That rubble we already looted, so onto the last question, and again the one about profession was more or less already answered.
Across the Ebon Lake.
The corpse does not stir. It will answer no more questions.
So, across the Ebon Lake, that is also where we will now go, and in order to do so, we want to take the boats that the Duergar used to get here. Let's keep in mind that we are also in the possession of some boots belonging to a Duergar sergeant. Officially, that will be our ticket into the Duergar camp.
A vessel wobbles on the lake's murky waters.
And since we are about to travel into a new area, the game gives us a choice to back out here. However, the decision stands. Let us embark.
You! What are you doing on Gex Raft? Where's Gek? Who are you?
Right, unsurprisingly, commandeering a Duergar boat raises some suspicions, and while we could provoke a fight here, we are not going to, and the easiest way to get a peaceful outcome is to show our brand of the Absolute, with a Persuasion DC of 10 and the Bliss Spores from Myconid Spore still active despite traveling to a new area. Success on this skill check here is virtually guaranteed.
All right. No reason to get your horns in a twist. Well, come on. Let's get you to shore. You'll need to report to the sergeant. You lot, keep patrolling. I'm heading back with this one.
You continue forward in silence until the lights of a camp twinkle through the murk.
Sideways. We've got a welcoming party.
You shithead! Time you showed up, we got trouble.
Spit it out! Sergeant finally choked on True Soul Near's prick.
Rugno! The twat soul caused a rockfall. Trapped tighter than a ring on a fat finger.
You're shitting me. You pay up?
That's the trouble. He's got the gold on him. Sergeant's arm is falling off with all the gnome slaves she's been beating. Who's the hoon, Greyman? Another slave for the dig?
So, looks like we've safely made it to the Duergar camp, that is, unless they mistake us for slaves at this point. So let's make it very clear that that's not who we are. At the same time, perhaps it could be wise not to mention the sergeant's boots just yet. So, since it worked once before, let's rely on our authority as a true soul.
That's so.
You feel the slightest of stirrings in your head. The Duergar is not infected, yet your minds resonate.
I'll be. You ain't shitting. Felt the tingle. Your twat soul chum owes us a load of coin. You want through? Make a donation.
No, I don't think we will. Stating that very clearly and matter-of-factly only reinforces our authority and also gets her to back down without a fight.
Unclog your hole. Just shitting around. But I'm warning you. That twat soul ain't settled up soon. There'll be hell to pay for the lot of you cult buggers.
And there we are. We have made it into the Duergar camp, and at least for the moment we are still alive. Now, one quick note at this point, by not fighting the Duergar on the boat earlier, we did miss out on a unique item. However, had we fought them, we would have missed out on several more, not to mention that Astarion also just received an inspiration for solving the matter peacefully. Now, there is another mutually exclusive inspiration for Lae'zel for picking a fight. In my opinion, though, this here is the better way to do it, and we gain just as many experience points for it as if we had fought the Duergar. Now, speaking of experience points, you may have also noticed this already, but we have just leveled up. So, let's take care of that right away before we continue and advance our party to level 6. For Sylvia, this is a big one, not necessarily because of counter charm, but a little extra protection against charm and frightening effects sure can't hurt. The real boost in power, meanwhile, comes from Sylvia finally unlocking her extra attack at level 6. Combine this with Slashing Flourish and she could now attack up to 5 times per turn. We also get to select a new spell. I'm rather fond of Glyph of Warding here. In most cases, this is essentially just an AoE damage spell. It remains to be seen how often we'll actually get to use it. For the most part, I anticipate Sylvia to keep using her crossbows. Up next then we have Karlach, and this is where we'll actually slightly change things up. Instead of further advancing down the path of Barbarian, we are now going to dip a few levels into Fighter, mostly just to unlock Action Surge at Fighter level 2. In terms of weapon and armor proficiencies, this doesn't actually change anything. We do unlock Second Wind though as a nice emergency healing option, and we get to pick a fighting style too. However, since none of these truly benefit a throwing weapons playstyle, the choice here doesn't matter too much. Great weapon fighting is probably the best choice for her though. Up next then we have Astarion, and while the game defaults to continuing down the path of Ranger, we will instead now actually pick up our 3rd rank in Rogue. For our subclass then we'll pick Assassin instead of Thief that we used for the majority of Act 1, which now permanently unlocks advantage against enemies who have not yet taken a turn in combat. In addition, any attack made against the surprised creature automatically crits, and finally, attacking from stealth outside of combat no longer means that Astarion loses his action or bonus action once he enters the initiative, effectively giving him 2 extra attacks now, potentially even 2 extra critical hits. So incredible burst damage potential here, you'll see how this works later in the video. Finally then, as the last member of our current party, we have Shadowheart. We'll keep her as a trickery cleric at least up to a certain point in the game. As a channel divinity action, she can now go invisible. In terms of spellcasting then, we do not need to make any choices just yet. As always, we can change our loadout at any point outside of combat. And there we are, our party is now at level 6, and one quick note about Karlach perhaps. If we truly wanted to go for the quote-unquote optimal class combination, then a few levels of Rogue would probably be even more powerful than Fighter. However, thematically I think Fighter fits much better. Now let's get to it. On a crate here we find a note, likely from a Duergar deserter, complaining about a steady diet of fungus, while a note right next to that marks 2 barrels, one containing food for the animals, the other food for the slaves. Sneaking off behind the 2 Duergar here, we can also loot a crate and a trunk. The trunk in particular contains an assortment of lovely valuables. Then we get moving up the stairs and towards the fast travel sigil over here. As you can see, there is a path down the stairs to our left side. At the bottom there seems to be some sort of prison area. We're going to leave that be for now and instead focus on another crate and a barrel right next to the stairs. These can be looted freely without anyone getting mad at us.
What's a fort like this doing in the Underdark?
Whoever built it, they've let it rot for ages.
A good question that we'll eventually also find answers to. A plaque on the wall here already gives us a first hint.
Come into her shadow. Let all that is past be forgotten.
Around the corner then, we'll run into an interesting pair of Duergar.
We might be able to chip them off and melt them.
Absolutely not. Or you'd be killing history itself.
This again?
Yes, this again. How peculiar. Smooth face, cobbled edges. They're a sign. They must be. A sun dweller in these parts. Look here, my topside friend. I need fresh eyes, and I doubt I'll find fresher.
Right, now in contrast to the Duergar we've met so far, this one seems outright friendly. Let's remark on that before we offer our help.
As rare as a smiling Sindlerin, you might say. But I've no skill for slaving. I prefer chisel to cane. But these learned eyes reach their limits, and so I must humbly request yours.
Now, before we lend a hand, or rather an eye, let's also find out what exactly it is he's doing.
Peering into cracks and crevices in hope to find history's morsels. I have come up regrettably short. I hope you might see truths where I cannot.
Right, and since we have no other option here but to offer help or leave, we are of course going with option 1.
The rock, the rubble, all of it, if I may be so bold. Take a look. Tell me what you see, and be thorough.
Alright, now at this point we are offered several skill checks, and to have an easier time we want to go with those marked for the Bard class. The deception check at the bottom here sounds intriguing, but not only is it much more difficult than the history check, it's also a bit mean, so instead let's try to remember a grand tale about this place. And even though history is not really Sylvia's forte, we get advantage on the roll and the DC is only 10, so not too difficult to pass.
You recall the tale of a Sharran fortress armed with impenetrable adamantine, a metal created by a gnomish mage. There were also whispers of the gnome's secret project, an invincible guardian, though its existence was never proven.
What do you think?
Alright, so a fortress to the goddess Shar, protected by an invincible guardian. At least parts of that track with the documents and notes we found in the Underdark already, so let's recite the tale and share some knowledge.
How fascinating. I told my kinfolk that book learning has its benefits. A crafty gnome, helping forge a fortress that would last an eon. Mythic metal atop stone hewn by the devoted. That's to say nothing of this tale of an invulnerable protector. It's unfortunate the Sharran's successors found no proof. Doesn't explain this infernal plate I found, though. Here. Take it. Perhaps you'll be able to figure out why it's here. But my work has only begun. There is more still to find. I must get to it.
Alright, and with that we have now earned ourselves a reward, and we could at this point trade with him.
Well, let's see what you've got.
This then also reveals our reward to be a piece of infernal alloy, not to be mistaken with the infernal iron we were introduced to during Karlach's questline, but potentially of similar usefulness. In terms of trade goods then, Kith unfortunately does not have anything we need at this point, so let's leave him to it.
That's all then.
History class, but this place has me captivated.
We can at this point also get a few lines out of the other stonemason, but he doesn't have much to say.
I'll give you one thing. You've got a keen eye. Even sharks have their uses.
Alright, and with that we can now leave these two stonemasons behind and keep exploring. We'll head in a northern direction until we encounter some Deep Rothés, and thanks to our Speak with Animals spell, we can now have a surprisingly interesting conversation.
Tired. Sleep.
Rest, little one, but do not take long. I feel his shadow. I heard his name whispered. The rock shivers from the sound. The Ketheric Thorm.
Ketheric Thorm, a familiar name. Halsin mentioned his stronghold deep underground.
Right, and with that very peculiar name mentioned, let's inject ourselves into the conversation and confirm that it is who we think it is.
Mighty elf, cloaked in darkness. 10 masters ago, and 10 more. But I remember. There was the work, and the blood. There was the Thorm's army. There was the Hellbeast that broke them. The Ketheric Thorm's name faded into stone, until the Near came.
Now, near, of course, the drow that the Duergar want us to rescue and the Myconids want us to kill. He too is a true soul of the Absolute, which holds potentially concerning implications.
I know not, so I say not. Yet I hear his name again, said by the shadows.
Alright, then perhaps with Ketheric's name slowly returning, it might be wise to ask who destroyed his army, just in case someone decides to follow in his footsteps.
I saw tusks and flesh, smelled fire and eggs. It came with the masked men, crashing and smashing.
Okay, masked men, not overly specific, but something to go on. And overall, considering the time frame here, this is impressive knowledge, so let's find out how old exactly this Rothé actually is.
I outlived my mother, and her mother's mother, and many mothers beyond. Blessed to see many live, cursed to see many die.
Alright, and so with some more knowledge gained, we now leave these beasts behind. Inside of the rotting baskets nearby, we can find plenty of alchemy ingredients, and then a few curious skeletons on the floor a few steps further. The one in the middle here carries the journal of a dark justiciar. In it, they describe a cursed amulet that caused fits of uncontrollable laughter. As a result, ultimately the amulet was taken from them and cast into the lava. Reading this journal then unlocks a quest to find the amulet ourselves and to help the spirit trapped inside. The skeleton's armor then also confirms that we are in fact looking at a dead Dark Justiciar, the Dark Justiciar male here granting a necrotic damage counterattack as long as the wearer is obscured by shadow. And if we at this point move on to investigate the other corpses, we quickly find that they carry similar suits of armor, damaged, but nonetheless a curious pattern.
As you look at the skeletons, you realize they are all clad in the same dark armor.
Dark Justiciar uniforms. These were Shar worshippers. The same as me.
Well, not surprising, considering this is most likely a former Sharran fortress. What is more concerning is the fact that they are dead, and very clearly did not die of natural causes.
Whatever killed a bunch of Sharrans might still be down here. Just saying.
Now, Karlach makes an excellent point here, and in fact our first fight is coming up shortly. We will once again bypass the stairs on the left here and continue north, where we run into some Duergar with animal problems.
Shove moss in your own gob and stay quiet. They've been fed plenty. You, grab a cane and whip these Drugnin beasts into shape. That rubble needs clearing, and my patience is hanging on by an arse whisker.
Right, this guy then, not so friendly, but it does seem like he's asking us for help. Let's get confirmation on that before we do anything.
And it sounds like your arse wants for a lashing, the way you talk out of it. Something spooks the dumb shits. So stop your jawing and get to working.
Well, how about we ask some questions instead, like what's behind the rubble that these guys are seemingly looking to clear?
You got no need to know, and I got no need to tell. So get to caning or to leaving.
Now, of course, we won't let ourselves get told off that easily, and with a moderately difficult DC 15 persuasion check, we can convince him to share some details. After all, if he wants our help, he better spill the beans.
Fine. Look at this. Adamantine. Stuff's no joke. Stronger than steel, rarer than mithril. It ain't mined, it's made. There's an adamantine forge back there, sure as shitting. Don't get any smart ideas. That forge is clan property. But get the beasts moving and I'll toss some coin your way.
Alright, now that we know what we're dealing with, we can make a decision, and of course we will agree to help. The promise of a reward does sound intriguing.
Go on then, light a fire under the buggers. Whimpering, or I'll take a slice off your haunches for my supper.
Right, so here we are, and of course, instead of whipping the beasts to get what we want, let us perhaps try talking to them instead.
No more! No more pain, no more work! All must die!
Okay, sounds like we're dealing with more than just a simple refusal to work. Let's find out more about what exactly is going on here.
Oh, death. Fire. I can smell it. It's too much anger. I can't hold it in.
Okay, so at this point we are presented with a few persuasion checks that would let us solve the situation, and we want to take note of the last one here. Seems like we have the option here to turn the Rothés against their Duergar masters, and taking note of that option, let us now make preparations. First things first, we move everyone but Sylvia into this little nook here and go into stealth mode. Then we jump into Asterian's inventory and swap the steel-forged sword in his offhand for the Club of Hill Giant Strength. This instantly boosts his strength from 8 to 19, and that will be very useful in just a second. And that's already all. Let us now speak to the beast once more.
Don't want to move, Rocks. Too much pain, too much noise.
At this point then, let us persuade the animal to give into its rage, but to focus its attacks only against the Duergar. With a DC of only 10, this check is currently impossible for Sylvia to fail.
Yes, they made the pain. Now they feel it.
Bloody Rothé have lost it. Put them down, and the shark too.
And just like that, combat begins, and thanks to her high dexterity, Sylvia goes first. None of the Duergar here have ability scores that can match hers. With the animals now fighting on our side, we have 3 enemies against us here. All of the Duergar are resistant to poison damage, but that will most likely not come into play. Overall, we're not really looking at terribly powerful foes. Morgia here fills the role of a barbarian, but if my plan for this encounter works, she is actually also the easiest one to dispatch off. Before we get to her though, let's strike with a Astarion from the shadows. With the club in his offhand, his damage output will be slightly reduced. Nonetheless, he gets the sneak attack bonus and an extra d8 in damage because the enemy is still at full health, and thanks to his awesome assassin subclass, his action and bonus action are now recovered as he enters the initiative. And that is very important for what comes next, as we plan on shoving Morgia to her demise, and since shoving consumes the bonus action, we need to use his regular action to hide. That way we gain advantage on the shove attack, and with a strength of 19, this now results in an 84% success chance. And there she goes, flying into the chasm for our first kill and 75 XP. And Astarion even gets one more attack thanks to Dread Ambusher. This attack, of course, also made an advantage, because Grundrel here did not yet have his turn. I think at this point you can slowly start seeing just how stupidly powerful Astarion can be with this build. If we had Surprise in this fight, he would have been able to launch 5 critical hits. I think we'll be just fine without it though. Karlach can now join the fight and throw her returning pike at the Herdmaster. That deals 24 points of damage, but sadly places her pretty far at the back of the initiative, but still before the Herdmaster, that is, if he survives for that long. Chances are he doesn't, as we can now unleash a slashing flourish, 1 crossbow bolt for each remaining enemy. And there we go, Grundrel is down too. That blast you just saw was Cull the Weak, by the way, a tadpole ability that I think I never actually activated. Either way, this now leaves the Herdmaster with 27 hit points, 16 after we use Sylvia's second action to shoot again, and we still have the bonus action. And there we are, that's the encounter solved, nice and easy, in just 1 turn without taking any damage, and Shadowheart didn't even need to join the fight. Sadly, we cannot speak to the dead now, because we were the one who killed him. Still, he's got some pretty decent loot on him.
Not much use for this slag. Nice speckles, though.
Sylvia is of course referring to the adamantine slag, which, as she correctly points out, has no further use beyond being a bit of a rarity.
Duergar can't hurt anymore. We'll wait until it's safe to leave.
Having killed the Duergar, we can now also ask the Rothés to do what the Duergar wanted them to do in the first place, proving once more that in some twisted fashion, violence can be the answer.
You helped me. I helped you.
And there we go, the animals have cleared the rubble and opened up a passage. We have earned a few more XP and will now explore beyond this passage. A pouch on the ground contains a second adamantine slag. A skeleton near the stairs here has some gold on it, and on the floor right next to it we find a curious devil foil mask.
Belongs to Amerigon, if I recall correctly. Hell's foot soldiers. I don't fancy meeting the commander.
Right, so this mask apparently belonging to a creature from hell. We should be on the lookout for more that are potentially alive. For now though, as we head up the stairs, we only find more skeletons at the top. They have some minor valuables on them, but nothing that would tell us who they were or how they died. From up here, we can then also overlook the underground river passage that we sailed through earlier, while in the vases we'll find some gold to help our party funds. Heading up the stairs, then there are some more coins to be found on yet another skeleton, while on the remnants of a broken bridge we find a curious orb of dark vision.
Something's off. Pure shadow. Around me. Inside me.
Now, this voice line may sound dramatic, but actually has no negative consequences. For the next 10 turns, Sylvia now has dark vision, but her regular eyesight is plenty to spot some traps here, and we don't want to try and jump the gap here anyway. So instead, let's grab a scroll of invisibility from around the corner and proceed towards the parapet. Right at the beginning, we find a trap disguised as a gargoyle statue. We have not triggered it yet, but let's make sure that we also won't in the future. With a DC of only 10, Astarion has no trouble disarming it. For the next few moments, we then also want to proceed with only Astarion going solo. Moving along the parapet, he discovers one pressure plate after another, and we want to make absolutely sure that no one else steps on them. With a passive perception bonus of +9, Astarion is also by far the most well-suited character for this task, and even if he occasionally fails a check, we can still safely navigate the area. The pressure plates that we need to avoid stepping on are easily visible, and as long as we manage to avoid them, none of the other traps will go off.
Traps. How considerate.
Eventually then we make it to the end of the walkway. As you can see, the path onwards is blocked by a metal gate. That gate is locked. Normally that wouldn't be a problem. In this case though, there is simply no lock to be picked. So we need to find another way to get to the other side, and thankfully Astarion has equipped the Amulet of Misty Step. This now allows him to access the lever behind the gate and earns him 35 experience points, and activating that lever now opens the gate and also shuts down all the traps we just walked by. So the rest of our party can now catch up and we can loot the Protectee Sparks Wall, robes that nicely synergize with the lightning charges mechanic, a very useful item for Gale, I think. In addition, we can get a brief line from Shadowheart by picking up the Idol of Shar over here.
An idol of Lady Shar. It cannot be a coincidence that I found this. All these signs of a Sharran presence. Dark Justiciars.
Once everything has been grabbed, we can then head out and go down the ladder that's right next to the gate. Down here we find a few crates and boxes. Most of them have nothing of terrible value inside of them. We can pick up a nice assortment of weapons though, and the heavy chest here also has some gold and alchemy ingredients. Around the corner then there are 2 barrels and 2 crates that we can also loot. Once again, nothing in there that we really need at the moment, but we have already learned that there is at least one trader down here, so we will be able to find someone who we can unload all of this with. Back up the parapet we go then, and down another ladder a bit further south. At the bottom we find another small chest with valuables, and then 2 levers, clearly used to control the hanging bridge over here. As you can see, this would be another way to cross over to the other side, and while there are some points of interest over there that we will visit soon, for today we will only cross over to the hanging walkway in the middle here.
A steel mold. Used in forges to cast armor and weapons.
Now, considering the stories of the Adamantine Forge, this is not a surprising find, and perhaps we should be on the lookout for more like it. Continuing along the walkway in a southern direction, we then eventually come across a skeleton. No fancy loot in particular on it, and this is also as far as we'll go. As you can see, the path continues for a few steps further and then breaks off, overlooking an area close to fiery hot lava. Eventually, we do want to go over there, but not quite yet. For today, we'll remain focused on the northwestern section of this area. At this point, we are now making our way back to that spot where the fight against the Duergar took place. Now that those Duergar have been dealt with, we can also freely loot the area. Unlike the barrels and boxes we encountered just a minute ago, all of these containers here are marked as owned, and next to the clutter and camp supplies, they do contain a few more weapons. Retracing our steps past the dead Dark Justiciars, we find a 4th one. Sadly, the armor on this skeleton is damaged too, but an area clearly used for combat practice behind the body promises more loot. A locked wooden chest is clearly the key point of interest. With a DC of only 10, Sylvia could likely get this open too, but we don't want Astarion to feel left out. Inside the chest then, 3 crossbows, one of them with a +1 enchantment.
No Duergar made this. The design looks Sharran.
And indeed, this is a Sharran crossbow, which changes, well, absolutely nothing about it. Perhaps apart from a bit more appeal for Shadowheart, who we will now give this to. In terms of its statistics and abilities though, it remains entirely the same. The rest of the containers nearby then has various bits and bobs in it, and these items are also once again free to take. Nonetheless, it looks like we're being watched regardless.
Another scrying eye, same as the goblins had. Someone's watching.
Better be careful around it.
And indeed, there is another scrying eye nearby, on the path next to the Rothés, and we did indeed encounter one of these before, back inside the goblin camp. A book next to a small campsite here then speaks of sloth, gluttony and vice, and encourages its reader to focus on their work and on nothing else. Seems to me like late-stage capitalism has made its way to the Duergar camp too. Apart from that, there are only clutter items in this place, so let's keep going. A somewhat easy to overlook path continues on behind the campsite. We can pick up a chasm creeper here after climbing down some rocks, and there is also another small gap that we can jump to access another treasure chest. And Sylvia failing her perception check here already tells us everything we need to know. This chest is clearly trapped, we just need someone to actually find it. After Shadowheart takes care of that, we can send Astarion over to disarm the trap. This time we need to hit a slightly more difficult DC of 15. For him though, that remains little trouble. The actual lock itself then is equally difficult, or easy, depending on how you want to look at it. Either way, once all of the bonuses have been applied, we're into the chest, and so we can now help ourselves to the real Sparky Sparks wall, a shield that probably goes well with the Protecty Sparks wall we just picked up a few moments ago, as this shield too interacts with the lightning charges mechanic, allowing its wielder to consume lightning charges to release a blast of electricity. At this point then, we can go no further, so let us retrace our steps and go back the way we came, past the Rothés and towards Stonemason Kith, who we now want to trade with.
The past is nearer than we think. We simply must dig.
And in exchange for the grand haul of items we just picked up, we are now going to purchase a Scroll of Greater Invisibility, a potentially useful spell for Gale to learn, and we also earn ourselves over 400 golden coins on top of it.
That's all then.
Well, that is all, at least for this conversation. We do have one more area still left to explore. Just around the back of the two stonemasons here, we can climb down a cragged rock, and just a few steps further, we find an interesting rune on the floor.
This is a Harper rune. There must be a stockpile nearby. Left out in plain sight like that? No, the Harpers are too smart for that.
So, a slightly too obvious Harper rune raises our suspicion. That, in combination with 3 prominently displayed wooden chests and a skeleton on the floor here, yeah, I think chances are high that we're about to run into a trap. So, let's ensure that we spot whatever is going on by casting Enhance Ability Wisdom on Astarion. That will now give him advantage on all perception checks, and for a little extra bonus on top of that, we'll also give him Guidance. Karlach is wearing the amulet, so that Shadowheart does not need to break concentration. Then we send Astarion out. The first thing he spots is a small toy chest over in the corner here. As he approaches one of the larger chests, he then fails a perception check despite our prep work. Luckily, it can be repeated with the others.
A poor imitation. I see you, you sneaky little shapeshifter.
And indeed, curiously, Astarion calls the chest a shapeshifter, and this is actually the case for all of them.
A poor imitation. I see you, you sneaky little shapeshifter.
So, these chests here are clearly not what they seem to be. However, since we have absolutely no idea what they are exactly, let us prepare for the worst. Sylvia, Karlach and Shadowheart will all pull back a good bit, and we're also going to put them all into stealth mode just to be safe. The same also goes for Astarion, who will, however, remain in attack range. The chests are sturdy, so let's shoot a firebolt and see what happens. Alright, looks like the 3 wooden chests were no wooden chests at all, but mimics. Creatures infamous for being able to shapeshift into inanimate objects. Thankfully, we spotted them early, otherwise this could have been a nasty surprise ambush. Although, despite avoiding that, they can be surprisingly difficult to take down. They may have a low armor class, but they are resistant to all 3 types of physical damage, which makes our current party not necessarily the most well suited for this fight. Still, it is doable even with these 4, particularly now at level 6, where some of our builds are starting to come online. As you can see, a sneak attack dread ambusher attack only deals 9 points of damage because of the resistances, so for Astarion's actual action we opt for a firebolt that is much more effective, but with the bonus action then we are left with no other choice but to go for an offhand crossbow bolt. That lands a critical, but only deals a meager 6 points of damage. After pulling Astarion back a bit, we then move in with Sylvia. and we are at this point going to cast the recently added Glyph of Warding for the first time. Damage type does not matter much, but you do want to avoid acid, as the mimics are immune to that. We go with fire, and with both enemies failing their saving throws, we see good results. Since the spellcasting did technically also happen before entering the initiative, Sylvia gets her action back. We're going to use it in just a second, but for now we switch over to Karlach. No surprises here with her. Throw, rage, and then another throw. And despite the mimic's damage resistances, we are able to deal double-digit damage both times. The only 8 hit points remaining on this target are also the reason why we waited to finish our turn with Sylvia, as an offhand crossbow shot now deals enough damage to trigger Cull the Weak, and so we have our action and therefore 2 more crossbow shots left to use elsewhere. We are also swimming in fire arrows, so how about we use some of those to spice up this fight? Unfortunately though, the mimic saves against it, but still we have created a fiery surface underneath it, and we do also end up a bit luckier with the other one. So that's 9 points of damage. Let's pull back and bring Shadowheart into the mix. She's currently sporting Cyanide, the Woodwold Shield, and the Hunting Shortbow. This grants her advantage against monstrosity-type creatures, which these mimics are, and it also sets her current armor class to a very decent 19. Let's boost that all the way up to 28 by casting Mirror Image. This has her join the initiative, sadly right between the 2 remaining mimics. However, once again, the spellcasting did technically happen before she joined the fight, so she regains her action to be used on her actual turn. At this point, we then see the mimic's atrocious movement range come into play. This here is all the ground that can be covered with a dash, so despite the fact that they do have a ranged attack, staying far enough away is usually enough to win this fight. We want to play things a bit more aggressively though, which is why we will now use a 3rd level spell slot with Shadowheart to cast Spirit Guardians. For the damage type we pick Radiant, but it doesn't really matter. As soon as we get close to the mimic here, it will take damage regardless. Now unfortunately the mimic makes the save and therefore only takes half damage. What we want to avoid at this point is having Shadowheart in melee range of both attackers, as Mirror Image would only offer complete protection against the first hit. For the second strike there would be a minuscule chance of taking some damage. So we move around to the side here, that should hopefully trigger another dash, and as you can see it works. The Spirit Guardians certainly help keep the mimic away too. Either way, I'd say we are now in a good place as turn 2 begins. We start things off then with Karlach. Once again it's going to be a very straightforward turn with her. While the mimics cannot be knocked prone, enraged throws still add some good extra damage. And then we follow things up with 2 regular throws, dealing a grand total of 34 damage, and once again, with barely any health remaining, we switch things over to Sylvia for a Cull the Weak killing crossbow shot. With that, we are now a further 75 XP richer and only have 1 more mimic remaining. And depending on the damage that Astarion can do with a firebolt from stealth here, we might be able to utilize Cull the Weak a second time. 13 points of fire damage are certainly alright, but probably not quite enough, as the first crossbow bolt from Sylvia here only adds a further 6, and the second one will likely not do that much more. There we go, even with a critical hit we only deal 7 points of damage. Remember what I said about a less than ideal squad composition? Nonetheless, we should have this one in the bag shortly if we keep playing things safe, so let's pull back and witness what is hopefully going to be the mimic's one and only attack. There we go, the bite attack misses and the mimic takes more fire and radiant damage, and with only 5 hit points remaining we should have little trouble taking it down. Shovel deals 3 and that should make things easy for Shadowheart, who attacks with advantage, but apparently even that is not enough and it looks like we need a 3rd turn of combat after all. Let's make this a quick one. Astarion moves up, goes into stealth mode and launches a firebolt. Inexplicably that misses too, so we turn to Miss Hairyfoot for the killing blow. And there we go, the 3 mimics are dead and our no damage taken streak remains intact. Let us now proceed to loot their bodies, which contain a few items of interest, some gold on the first mimic and some more practical items on the second one. A +1 hand axe might come in handy for our throwing barbarian Karlach. The real treasure, however, are the wondrous gloves. These increase the wearer's armor class by 1 and also give them an extra bardic inspiration charge, if they have access to the feature. And despite all that, we will likely not use them with Sylvia. I'll explain why in just a minute. For now, let us also not forget about the small toy chest that Astarion spotted earlier. Interacting with it then reveals the actual Harper Stash, and a successful perception check also reveals that stash to be trapped. And we're moving into slightly more difficult territory with the disarming skill check here. For this chest, we already need to beat a DC of 20, and that goes both for the trap as well as for the lock keeping the chest closed. However, as you can see, Astarion is not quite struggling to beat those DCs just yet, and so we open the chest, earn some XP and gain access to a scroll of evidence. In this one, the name Catherick Thorm is once again mentioned, who the Harpers declare guilty of crimes against body and spirit. They also write that they wish for an alliance between the Harpers and the Emerald Enclave, and by that they mean none other than the Druids of the Emerald Grove. Very interesting information. In addition, we also pick up a scroll of Wall of Fire, and with that I think we have now reached a good point to wrap up today's episode. As you can see, I've given the Wondrous Gloves to Shadowheart for the time being to boost her AC to 20. For Sylvia, I still prefer the Gloves of Archery. The +2 damage bonus on all ranged weapon attacks seems a bit more powerful to me, a benefit that is in my opinion not quite made up for by the addition of a single bardic inspiration. Now, with that being said, let's make the cut. At this point, we have explored perhaps a good quarter of the area. Next time, there will be more fun and fighting with the Duergar. For today, the only thing left is to show off some fan art. Not the most common thing with this series, I'll admit, but regular artwork contributor Tony Murchison put together this lovely scene, Sylvia and Karlach doing their best William Tell impression. So let's hope that Sylvia's aim remains true in the days to come. For today, let's make the cut. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. If you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course also go ahead and subscribe to stay up to date, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or become a channel member or Patreon supporter. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.